Karen hadn't slept. By 5 a.m., she was already at the community pool, watching the hazmat team in white suits test water samples. Channel 7's news van idled nearby, and reporter Jessica Chen was doing a live broadcast just outside the gate. HOA President Karen Whitfield, who neighbors describe as obsessively controlling, has maintained these chemical logs personally for 3 years. "I'm not obsessive," Karen muttered to herself. "I'm thorough." The hazmat team leader approached her, pulling off his gloves. "Ma'am, we found the problem. Your pool company has been using incorrect chemical ratios for at least 6 months. The pH levels were dangerous, but your testing strips were expired. They've been giving false readings." Karen's world tilted again. She pulled out her testing supplies with trembling hands. The expiration date on the strips, March 2024. It was now June 2025. "But I order new supplies every quarter. I have the receipts." Sometimes expired strips will show normal readings even when chemicals are at dangerous levels. It's why we recommend monthly replacement, not quarterly. The mistake hit her like a physical blow. Her meticulous record-keeping, her twice-weekly testing, her absolute confidence in her system, all built on faulty foundation. She had hurt a child because she'd been too proud to question her own methods. Behind her, she heard footsteps. The entire neighborhood seemed to be gathering at the pool fence. Angry faces, worried parents, former allies now looking at her with disgust and suspicion. Tom Johnson stepped forward, the same man she'd fined for tall grass just yesterday. "Karen, the Hartwell boy is still in the hospital. Second-degree chemical burns on 30% of his body." "I didn't know," she whispered. "The strips showed normal readings. I documented everything." "You documented wrong information," Sarah Johnson shouted, her baby crying in her arms. "This is what happens when you think you're better than everyone else." The crowd murmured agreement. 3 years of accumulated resentment over parking citations, grass measurements, and mailbox color corrections was boiling over. "I was protecting property values," Karen said weakly. "I was trying to help." "Help?" Mrs. Chen laughed bitterly. "You've been terrorizing this neighborhood for years, finding people for flowers that were too bright, measuring grass with a ruler, calling code enforcement on anyone who looked at you wrong." Detective Rodriguez appeared at Karen's shoulder. "Ms. Whitfield, I need to ask you some more questions, privately." The crowd parted as they walked toward the HOA office. Karen could feel dozens of eyes burning into her back, could hear the whispered conversations starting up behind her. In the office, Detective Rodriguez sat across from her at the conference table where she'd held countless violation hearings. "The pool company is saying you micromanaged their service calls, insisted on specific chemicals, specific timing. They claim they warned you about the testing strip schedule, but you overruled them." Karen's memory was fuzzy, but fragments came back. The pool technician mentioning something about monthly strips, her dismissing it as a sales tactic, her insistence that quarterly was sufficient because that's what the manufacturer recommended 2 years ago. "I thought I was being fiscally responsible," she said quietly. "A child is in the hospital, Ms. Whitfield. His parents are talking to lawyers. The county is considering whether to file charges against you personally." The words hit like hammer blows. Criminal charges, lawsuits, the end of everything she'd built. "I need to see him," Karen said suddenly. "The boy, I need to apologize to his family." Detective Rodriguez shook his head. "I wouldn't recommend that. Anything you say could be used against you if this goes to court." As evening approached, Karen sat alone in her perfect house, staring at her phone. 17 missed calls from her sister Linda, 4 voicemails from her mother, text messages from her few remaining friends asking if she was okay. She wasn't okay. She hadn't been okay for a long time. Outside, she could see neighbors talking in small groups on the sidewalk, their conversations stopping whenever they noticed her watching from the window. For the first time in 3 years, Karen Whitfield had no rules to enforce, no violations to document, no control to maintain. She had never felt more lost in her life. Judge Martinez sentenced her to 200 hours of community service, 3 years probation, and restitution for tireless medical expenses. 6 months later, Karen was volunteering at the children's hospital, reading stories to kids in the burn unit. Tyler, now fully healed except for small scars on his forearms, had become her favorite reading partner. "Miss Karen," he said after she finished reading about a dragon who learned to be gentle, "are you still the boss of the neighborhood?" "No, sweetheart. I learned that being the boss isn't as important as being a friend." Linda visited every month, noting the gradual changes in her sister's house. The violation files had been replaced by photo albums. The framed certificates had given way to children's artwork from the hospital. The measuring tape had been retired in favor of baking supplies. But late at night, Karen sometimes stood at her window, watching the neighborhood she'd once ruled with an iron fist. The new HOO president, Dr. Patel, managed violations with common sense rather than obsessive documentation. Property values remained stable. The community thrived without her micromanagement. And sometimes she caught herself calculating whether the Hendersons' garden gnomes were exactly 18 inches from the property line. Old habits die hard, but Karen was learning that some kinds of control weren't worth holding on to. The question was, what would she discover about herself when she finally let go completely? The unmarked sedan had been parked in visitor spot number 3 for exactly 47 minutes without a permit. Karen approached with her camera and citation book, ready to document this flagrant violation of Section 12.3b of the parking ordinance. But as she got closer, she noticed something odd. The driver was still inside, talking on his phone. Heated conversation, urgent gestures. When he spotted her approaching, he quickly ended the call and rolled down his window. "Ma'am, I'm Detective Rodriguez with Metro Police. I'm here on official business regarding one of your residents." Karen's citation hand faltered. "Official business? Who?" "I'm afraid I can't discuss details, but I need to speak with the HOA president about maintenance records." "That would be you, correct?" The knot in Karen's stomach tightened. In 3 years as president, she'd never had police involvement. Her neighborhood was supposed to be perfect, crime-free, a testament to her leadership. What kind of maintenance records? Detective Rodriguez glanced at his notes. "Pool maintenance, specifically chemical treatment logs. There's been an incident." Karen's mind raced. The community pool was her crown jewel, maintained by Henderson Pool Services. She personally inspected it twice weekly. What kind of incident? "A child was hospitalized yesterday after swimming in your pool. Chemical burns. The family is considering pressing charges against the HOA." The world tilted. Karen gripped her citation book so hard her knuckles went white. "That's impossible. I check those chemical levels myself every Tuesday and Friday. I have documentation." "Ma'am, I need those records. All of them." 40 minutes later, Karen sat in the HOA office, watching Detective Rodriguez photograph her meticulous maintenance logs. Every entry, every signature, every chemical reading documented in her perfect handwriting. "These look comprehensive," he admitted, almost obsessively so. "I take my responsibilities seriously, Detective. The safety of this community." Her phone exploded with notifications. The neighborhood Facebook group was in meltdown. Parents demanding answers. Threats to sue. Calls for her resignation. This is what happens when you put a control freak in charge. She probably caused this with her micromanaging. "My kids swim in that pool. What else has she been covering up?" Karen stared at the screen, watching 3 years of careful reputation management crumble in real time. Her hands shook as she typed a response. "I am investigating this matter thoroughly and will provide updates as appropriate." The replies came instantly. "Too little too late, Karen." Detective Rodriguez closed his folder. "The pool company will be here tomorrow to test everything again. I'd recommend keeping it closed until we know more." After he left, Karen sat alone in the office, surrounded by her perfect filing systems and color-coded violation reports. For the first time in years, she felt genuinely afraid, not of rule breakers or property value decline, but of losing the only thing that gave her life meaning: control. Her phone rang. The caller ID made her stomach drop further. "Mom." She let it go to voicemail, but played it back immediately. "Karen, honey, I saw the news about your neighborhood on Channel 7. Something about a child getting hurt? Are you okay? Please call me back. I'm worried about you. The news. Of course it had made the news. Karen opened her laptop and searched for Rosewood Estates pool incident. 3 different news articles, each mentioning her name as HOA president. The comments sections were brutal. As evening fell, Karen walked through her empty house, past framed certificates of her HOA achievements, past walls covered in neighborhood improvement photos, past the dining room table where she held solitary meetings with herself. Outside, she could see lights on in houses throughout the neighborhood. Families eating dinner together, kids playing in yards, couples talking on porches. Life happening all around her while she existed in her fortress of rules and regulations. Tomorrow, she would have to face them all. Linda arrived at 2 a.m. with chocolate chip cookies and zero patience for Karen's self-pity. She took one look at her sister's immaculate house, with its color-coordinated violation files and framed HOA certificates, and started laughing. Jesus, Karen, you turned your home into a shrine to suburban fascism. It's not funny, Linda. I'm facing criminal charges. My life is over. Linda sat down across from her sister, noting the dark circles under Karen's eyes, the tremor in her hands, the way she kept straightening already straight papers. When's the last time you had fun? Real fun, not measuring someone's fence height. Karen couldn't remember. Every social interaction for 3 years had been HOA related. Every conversation had been about violations, property values, or enforcement. I was protecting the neighborhood, Karen said weakly. You were hiding, Linda replied. From what? I don't know. But this obsession with control. This isn't you, Karen. The sister I grew up with was spontaneous. She painted watercolors. She laughed so hard she snorted. The next morning, Linda dragged Karen to visit Tyler Hartwell in the children's hospital. Karen had been dreading this moment for days, but she knew she had to face what her negligence had caused. Tyler's mother, Jennifer, was reading to her 8-year-old son when they knocked on the door. The boy's arms were wrapped in bandages, and Karen felt sick seeing the physical evidence of her failure. Mrs. Hartwell, Karen began, her voice barely a whisper. I'm Karen Whitfield. I wanted to apologize. I know who you are, Jennifer said coldly. You're the woman who cared more about grass height than water safety. The words stung because they were true. Karen had spent countless hours measuring lawns while ignoring expired testing strips. She prioritized the appearance of perfection over actual safety. You're right, Karen said, surprising everyone including herself. I lost sight of what really mattered. I hurt your son because I was more concerned with control than care. Tyler looked up from his book. Are you the lady who yells at people about their flowers? Karen's heart broke a little more. Yes, sweetie, I am. And I'm very sorry about that too. Jennifer's expression softened slightly. Tyler, this is the lady who runs the neighborhood association. She made a mistake with the pool chemicals. Did you say sorry to the pool? Tyler asked seriously. What? Mom says when I make mistakes, I have to say sorry to everyone I hurt. Did you say sorry to the pool for putting the wrong stuff in it? Linda squeezed Karen's shoulder as tears started flowing. Here was this child, burned by her negligence, teaching her about accountability with more grace than she'd shown anyone in 3 years. 2 weeks later, Karen stood before Judge Martinez for her preliminary hearing. The prosecutor laid out the case: criminal negligence, failure to maintain safe conditions, endangering the welfare of a child. The defense attorney Linda had hired argued for reduced charges based on Karen's cooperation and genuine remorse. Ms. Whitfield, Judge Martinez said, you've pleaded guilty to criminal negligence. Before I pass sentence, do you have anything to say? Karen stood, her hands steady for the first time in weeks. Your Honor, I spent 3 years believing that control and perfection would create a perfect community. Instead, I created fear and resentment. I turned neighbors into enemies and priorities into obsessions. Tyler Hartwell was hurt because I valued my system more than safety, my rules more than relationships. She paused, looking at the Hartwell family in the gallery. Tyler waved at her with his unbandaged hand. I can't undo the harm I've caused, but I can learn from it. I want to make amends not just through community service, but by becoming the kind of person who builds community instead of controlling it. Karen Whitfield stood on her pristine front porch at 6:47 a.m., measuring tape in one hand, citation book in the other, staring at the Johnson's grass with the intensity of a forensic investigator. 17 3/4 inches. The HOA covenant clearly stated 18 inches maximum. This is it, she muttered, scribbling furiously. This is how neighborhoods fall apart. At 43, Karen had transformed from a mild-mannered insurance adjuster into Rosewood Estates' most feared HOA president. Her blonde bob was always perfectly styled, her pantsuits pressed to military precision, and her dedication to maintaining property values was legendary or notorious, depending on who you asked. She marched to the Johnsons' door and knocked with authority. Tom Johnson answered in his bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, looking like he'd rather face a tax audit. Ms. Whitfield, it's not even 7. The grass doesn't care what time it is, Thomas. 17 3/4 inches. She held up her measuring tape like evidence in a murder trial. That's a $50 fine. Tom's wife, Sarah, appeared behind him, bouncing their colicky baby. Karen, please. We just got Emma to sleep after being up all night. Count this weight. Karen's expression softened for exactly 2 seconds before hardening again. Rules don't take sick days, Sarah. Neither do property values. She handed over the citation with a flourish. Payment due within 14 days. As she strutted back to her house, Karen felt the familiar surge of satisfaction. Order, control, purpose. These people needed her, even if they didn't appreciate it. Especially the Hendersons at 47 Maple Drive with their unauthorized wind chimes, or the Pattles with their 2 colorful garden gnomes. Her phone buzzed. Text from her sister Linda. Mom's been asking about you. When's the last time you visited? Karen deleted it without responding. She had more important things to worry about than her mother's guilt trips. Like the fact that someone had been walking their dog on the wrong side of Elm Street. The pet waste receptacles were clearly marked for the north side only. She spent the morning drafting violation notices, checking her security cameras, and updating her spreadsheet of infractions. By noon, she'd issued 7 citations and scheduled a friendly reminder visit to the Chens about their slightly off-white mailbox. But as Karen sat in her immaculate living room, surrounded by HOA documents and violation reports, a strange emptiness crept in. The house was silent except for the grandfather clock's ticking. No laughter, no conversations, no life. She pushed the feeling away. Feelings were messy. Rules were clean. Her phone rang. The HOA hotline she'd established for reporting violations. Rosewood Estates Compliance Office. Karen speaking. There's someone parked in visitor parking without a permit, whispered Mrs. Chen from next door. License plate, Georgia 847 NFD. Karen smiled. Finally, a real emergency. The emergency HOA meeting was called for Thursday evening. Karen sat at the head of the conference table in the community center, facing 47 angry residents. The same residents she'd spent 3 years protecting from property value decline and neighborhood decay. Board member Patricia Williams, one of Karen's few remaining allies, called for order. We're here to discuss the pool incident and we're here to demand Karen's resignation. Tom Johnson stood up, his voice carrying across the room. She's been a dictator for 3 years, and now a child is hospitalized because of her incompetence. The room erupted in agreement. Karen tried to speak, but her voice was drowned out by angry shouts. She fined me for having flowers that were too vibrant for the neighborhood aesthetic. She called code enforcement on my elderly mother for having a bench that was 2 inches too tall. She made my daughter take down her lemonade stand because it wasn't in the approved location. Patricia banged her gavel repeatedly. Please, let's maintain order. Order. Sarah Johnson laughed harshly. That's all Karen cares about. Not people, not community, just her perfect little rules. Karen finally found her voice. She stood slowly, her hands shaking as she gripped her prepared statement. I want to begin by expressing my deepest regret about Tyler Hartwell's injury. I take full responsibility for the chemical testing failure. Too little, too late, someone shouted from the back. And I want you all to know that every decision I made was intended to protect our community, to maintain property values, to create a neighborhood we could all be proud of. The room fell silent, but it wasn't the respectful silence she was used to. It was the quiet before a storm. Dr. Patel, the pediatrician from Oak Street, stood up. His voice was measured, but filled with disappointment. Karen, do you know what my property value was when I moved here 4 years ago? Karen nodded. $347,000. And do you know what it's worth now, after 3 years of your leadership? Current estimates show $392,000. Do you know what it would be worth if our neighborhood had a reputation for being welcoming instead of hostile? If families wanted to move here instead of avoiding us because of stories about the crazy HOA president? The question hung in the air. Karen had never considered that her enforcement might actually hurt property values by making Rosewood Estates infamous for the wrong reasons. Mrs. Chen spoke up quietly. My daughter won't play outside anymore because she's afraid of getting in trouble with you. She's 8 years old, Karen. She's afraid of playing in her own yard. More voices joined in. My guests won't visit because they're terrified of parking wrong. We've had 3 families move away specifically because of HOA harassment. I've seen you measuring people's grass at 6 in the morning, like some kind of suburban secret police. Each story was a punch to Karen's gut. She thought she was protecting them, but she'd been terrorizing them. The perfect neighborhood she tried to create existed only in her own mind. Detective Rodriguez entered the back of the room during the testimonials. Karen's heart sank as he approached the front. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said quietly, but I have an update on the investigation. Tyler Hartwell's condition has stabilized, but he'll need skin graft surgery. The district attorney is moving forward with criminal negligence charges. The room exploded again. Karen felt the floor disappear beneath her feet. Criminal charges meant court, lawyers, possible jail time. It meant the end of everything. Through the chaos, she heard her phone buzzing. Text from Linda. I'm driving down tonight. Don't make any decisions until I get there. For the first time in years, Karen felt a flicker of relief at the thought of her sister's arrival. She needed someone, anyone, who didn't see her as a monster. The vote was unanimous. Karen Whitfield was removed as HOA president, effective immediately. As the meeting disbanded, residents filed past her without making eye contact. Some looked angry, some looked sad, but most just looked tired. Tired of fighting with her, tired of living under her constant scrutiny, tired of calling this place home. Patricia Williams approached her as the room emptied. Karen, I think you should take some time away. Maybe visit your family. Karen nodded numbly. Family. When was the last time she prioritized anything above HOA business? Outside, she stood in the parking lot as cars drove away, their headlights sweeping across her face. 3 years of absolute power, gone in one evening. But for the first time in months, the knot in her chest loosened slightly. Maybe losing control wasn't the worst thing that could happen to her.